USMLE. Well guys, I'm going to be essentially going to today I'm going to be talking about essentially Kawasaki disease. Why do I have a baby with a motorcycle? But essentially because Kawasaki is so important, because it can be remembered through a very simple photo that Kawasaki is kind of a brand which makes motorcycles, I believe, in Japan and internationally, and essentially it affects children. And why is it such an important pediatric disease is because it affects the heart. You can kind of remember this because we can see from the bike you remember Kawasaki disease, from the kid you remember baby, and you obviously kind of remember when he's riding a bike, his heart would be racing, his heart would be because of adrenaline possibly, his heart would be pumping faster than normal. Essentially this is going to be, like I said previously, it's really important because of the main thing that's mentioned here is that it mainly affects children, so therefore it's pediatric disease, and also because it affects the coronary artery. And the second thing third thing I want to mention is that it's usually self-limited. So what does it mean by usually self-limited? Meaning that like it kind of can be treated without treatment. So, but for its treatment, you need aspirin, IVIG, which is a whole other topic. But essentially, it is self-limited. It can affect the coronary artery. How? It can form aneurysms, and when it leads to aneurysms, eventually could lead to myocardial infarction. Alright, so the next thing I would like to talk about is pathogenesis. Pathogenesis is essentially going to be the hyper, it's going to be basically a hypersensitivity reaction to a vascular antigen. So it's going to be essentially, let's zoom out here, and just kind of want to put the B cells out of the play and all the cytokine out of the play, because essentially there's going to be an antigen, a vascular antigen or a vascular antigen somewhere over here, and the T cells will kind of detect it, and this will lead to a type like a hypersensitivity reaction. And I believe the T cells, they also produce cytokines. I'm not 100% sure if T cells produce cytokines or some immune mediated cells produce cytokines, which would lead to B cell activation, and obviously from there can be auto antibodies against the endothelial cells. The last thing would be morphology. For morphology, you must understand the morphology of a blood vessel. If you focus over here, there are three layers. So layer number 1, endothelial cells. Layer number 2, smooth muscle cells. Layer number 3, obviously adventitious cells. Right. So now, morphology? How would these vessels look like? So essentially, how would you expect this to be? Is that all three layers of the blood vessel will be inflamed. So endothelial, smooth muscle, and adventitia be inflamed. What will this lead to? When there's inflammation, it's going to lead to fibrinoid. It can also lead to fibroid necrosis. How fibroid necrosis? Well, we'll have to get it from our stuff from here. Antigen, and antigen will deposit over here, and guess what else will deposit over here? Bodies. When antigen and antibodies deposit over here, this can lead to fibrinoid necrosis due to the upper deposition of immune complexes. Right, now when there's inflammation, we get fibrinoid necrosis. You can kind of tell that this part of the wall is going to get weak. This can lead to aneurysms, but usually in acute vasculitis they can subside, but it can lead to aneurysms, and this can essentially, when there's aneurysms, when there's some sort of damage to the endothelial cells, there can be exposure of the cell endothelial collagen and tissue factor, which can lead to activation of platelets and essentially lead to thrombosis. Again, can lead to myocardial infarction. And outside the, like, you might be wondering, does Kawasaki disease affect only coronary arteries, or does it affect many other arteries? Well, outside the arteries are really not significant. Prognosis means predictions. So prognosis can be, like I said previously, inflammation. Number one thing is inflammation. Number 2, aneurysm. Number 3, myocardial infarction in children. Like when you think of myocardial infarction, the really risk factors, the really people who usually get are old people. But children, when? Kawasaki disease. Another key point is if it's diagnosed early, it can be cured. Okay, so this is gonna be about it, but I want to ask you guys questions before I leave. So which are the Kawasaki disease? Why is it so important? Answer being it affects coronary arteries. over here. Second question about Kawasaki disease. Who does it really affect? Children. Kawasaki disease, is it does it require a lot of treatment, or is it self-limited? Answer: self-limited. Yep. What is its main pathology? What does it mean? Which cells are involved in this pathology? Obviously T cells through type hypersensitivity, and also another answer being the B cell activation. Another question could be how would the blood vessels essentially how would the blood vessels essentially look like in morphology? So the answer would be, obviously there can be inflammation, there can be fibrinoid necrosis, and obviously another answer could possibly be aneurysm, which will lead to myocardial infarction. Another question can be for you guys is that can there be any type of pathology outside the heart? The answer is it's really insignificant. And my last question for you guys for testing your knowledge is that in terms of prognosis, can there be any what can be the ultimate if it's detected early, is that a good sign? So yes, and I said last question, but let me just add a last question to it, one more question to it. So if there is going to be aneurysms and inflammation, what can that lead to? The answer being right here, myocardial infarction. Well guys, thank you for watching this video.